Hello and welcome. I'm Eric, and this is the Long Box Review comic book podcast. I want to welcome you to another edition of One Hit Wonders, which is my examination of some single issues, specials, one-shots, or in this case, even single issue titles that were intended to be ongoing, but were not. And today I'll be talking about Marilyn Manor, which is an IDW comic that came out in 2019, and we only saw one issue, even though all 4 issues of this miniseries were solicited, as well as the trade collection, and I'll get into that in a little bit. Like I said, this issue came out in 2019. The title is Living on Video. It was written by Magdalene Visaggio, art by Marley Zarconi, with colors by Irma Nivilla. I'm not sure how to pronounce this unusually spelled last name. Letters by Jane Eyre. Editors were Megan Brown and Shelley Bond, with a cover by Zarconi and colors by Tamara Bonvillain. So this, as I said, this was intended as a 4-issue miniseries under the Shelley Bond Black Crown imprint from IDW. This issue was hinted at by Visaggio on Twitter on March 2019, and then printed in June. But in September, all other issues and the trade collection, as I said, which was supposed to be printed in November of that year, were canceled. And then shortly thereafter, I believe, the Black Crown imprint was shuttered as well. It has been suggested, based on my research, that the financial woes at IDW caused this particular issue. I recall seeing some noise at the time from a certain gated comics community celebrating this cancellation, but the advance buzz for the series was mostly positive, and I'll just let you know right now, I quite enjoyed this, and I was looking forward to reading the rest of it. And so I'll be talking about the comic and what I thought about certain things, but I'll start off by giving you the solicitation for this. Where were you in 81 when the White House goes dark for 17 days in August? The president's spoiled daughter and her best friend Abe, who claims to be possessed by the spirit of Abe Lincoln, throw a rager at 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue, unearthing long-dead historical figures and government secrets that are better off buried. Sex, drugs, rock and roll seances, and secret passageways lead to time-bending mystical romps where past and present collide. But at what cost to Marilyn Keller, the world at large, and music television? Marilyn Manor explores identity, classism, appropriation, and friendship. It's a rollicking neon party gone out of bounds when we need it most. Set just in time for the greatest pop culture marriage to date, MTV. Visaggio said, "We've been trying to capture the feel, the excitement, the energy of the rise of the new romantics, of the decade that embraced excess and excitement in hugely over-the-top ways and filled it with chaos and insanity. This is the weirdest thing I've ever written in the best way possible, like an apocalypse directed by John Hughes." Who would not want to read this? Especially as a child of the 80s. I saw... or in this comic book, I saw so many things that I recognize, that I appreciated, and I was just really curious where this was going to go. So that was the overall view of the series for this particular issue. Here's the rundown. Marilyn Keller, as I mentioned previously, is the daughter of the President of the United States. She decides to throw a rager at the White House while President Dad, which is a term that she uses, is in Asia for I believe it's a economic related trip. Her best friend and videographer is named Abe, who's possessed by the ghost of Lincoln after a Ouija board incident, which they just briefly discuss in the story. We are told a bit about Marilyn's past, that she was named by her mother after the woman her dad had an affair with, which was Marilyn Monroe. And she once flipped off the cameras at her father's re-election race that was being televised. Her nemesis is in this story is White House Deputy Chief of Staff Matthew Whitkin, who told Marilyn that no parties were allowed in the 3 weeks her parents were away. While trying to think of a way to circumvent that restriction, Marilyn discovers a secret tunnel placed there after the War of 1812 so the president could make a quick getaway. She tells Abe that she could sneak everyone for the party through the tunnel and that they had to have the party because, quote, if a big-ass party full of love and drugs and happiness happened here, it would spread out across the country like a beautiful psychic bonfire. Which, the naivete of Marilyn, but just her outlook, I just love. It's too bad that, things like that actually don't happen in real life. While exploring the tunnel, they discover a sex dungeon once used by JFK and Marilyn Monroe. The first daughter talks about how she admires the blonde bombshell. Later, the party is about to start when Whitkin finds a DJ roaming the halls in the White House. When asked how he got in, the DJ nonchalantly tells him about the tunnel. Marilyn starts the festivities by announcing, quote, let's set this place and the world on fire. Let's burn. Okay, so the cover for Marilyn Manor #1. First of all, there's a lot of pink on here, which very eye-catching. The title logo, which was created by Tim Daniel, has a stylized Marilyn in pink, and Manor is in black and white boxes below it, with the O of Manor essentially being lips. I presume, it being this is like a Marilyn Monroe motif that they're suggesting here. Lips are also on the left side border over a black strip as well. Interestingly, when you Google Marilyn Manor, the first result is an assisted, at least as of 2023, is an assisted living facility in Scottsdale, Arizona. So, because I was kind of curious if there was if this was touching on some existing idea of the White House being Marilyn Monroe's manor, but I couldn't find anything like that. Marilyn has her back to us, but she's looking back at us, her face and profile, and she's wearing a pink jacket with a presidential seal and a patch over it that reads, First Brat. Her hairstyle, eyeshadow, and triangular earrings all evoke an 80s punk aesthetic to me. Her head has an interesting offset look to it in terms of the coloring, and I'm not sure if that is intentional or it's a printing issue, but I'm pretty sure it's intentional. Oh, in fact, this is why I should read ahead in my notes as I'm talking about this stuff. From comiccon.com about the announcement made at Emerald City Comic-Con in 2019 about this book, Tamara Bonvillain discussed the process of coloring the covers through flatting work, where she was given some inspirational Andy Warhol and Marilyn Monroe shots. Then she gave it more of a what was termed a cell shading approach to the initial colors. I'm not sure what that means. Then she added a shift to give a certain feeling of off-register printing, which is exactly what I was mentioning there. It was something people tried to avoid when publishing comics in the 90s, she was noting. But they intentionally wanted to do that here, which I thought, given the aesthetic of the 80s and, like I said, the over-the-top nature and also evoking comics from early 80s, I thought this was a nice touch. But to me, it's more about I don't know, glitz and glam of video, the MTV generation. I don't know. It just evoked a lot of different things for me. But very striking cover. I didn't mention there's a greenish background, but the top of it going to a point, a peak in the middle of the top of the comic book cover, and then white. So it's very striking color wise. So if you saw this on the shelf back in 2019, you definitely would have seen this. You would have noticed it for sure. Okay, as far as the story, So the inside front cover contains the issue title, as I said, Living on Video, and the credits. But what is interesting is the background image of Marilyn from the cover within the stylized M from MTV that's repeated. It's like an Andy Warhol motif. In one article I read about the series, there was a mention of the story being set in August, on August 1st, 1981, which was the debut of MTV. But I couldn't find a specific reference in the book that actually placed it on that date. But it's close enough, even though I feel like sometimes the intention to connect to MTV and what that meant at that time is more suggested than actually in the story. So, however, right away on the first page, you get a good idea of who Marilyn is by her monologue, because she's talking to us as if we're in the room with her. We're one of her friends or confidants. Given the connection to MTV, it's like she's the VJ talking to us as she's introducing the next video, or at least the premise of the story. As I said, her mom named her after Marilyn Monroe, with whom her father, then a junior senator, had an affair. At which point, our Marilyn, even winks at us, which comes into play at the end of the issue, and I'll get to that. Zarconi's art does a great job of establishing Marilyn's look and personality in the 4 panels she appears in on this page, and Navilla does a great job of showing the black and pink dye Marilyn has used to color her hair. So she's just got done dyeing her hair, and then she's talking to us. And there's these little splotches of black and bright pink all over the bathtub, on the floor. It's just a nice little touch. Letterer Air, I assume it's the letterer here. Maybe it's the artist. Does a great job in the final panel of evoking the really loud beat coming from the next room as Marilyn opens the door, because you see boom, boom, boom here, but it's only coming through the opening in the door. So it's just a really great way to evoke really loud music playing in the next room. The next 2 pages are a spread of a party already underway in what looks to be the Oval Office, but I'm not entirely sure of that. What's notable here is the colors again, emulating a veritable rainbow of party lighting, which nice effect. Also, the way Zarconi has Marilyn's arm outstretched across the 2 pages toward not only the vista of partygoers, but her reflection in the windows in the background, and more subtly to the next major character in the issue, her best friend Abe. So it's just a great way of visually drawing your eye across this 2-page spread to what's important. This, at least to me, one of the most important aspects of this particular issue is the friendship between Marilyn and Abe. Abe is, as Marilyn tells us, her best friend and videographer, which was interesting. Already mentioned, she's supposedly possessed by the ghost of Abe Lincoln. Abe is videotaping the festivities, which was something newish at the time, because Sony introduced the consumer camcorder in 1980. Though I remember the device being my version of it, which was several years later, being bigger than the one that's shown here. So, anyway, we quickly learn that Marilyn has the hots for American slugfest lead singer Harry "Scary" Sykes, which, to today's modern audience, Harry Styles kind of. I think of Harry Styles in this context, even though American Slugfest is more of a punk band. And then appearing out of nowhere at the bottom of page 5 is an ominous-looking middle-aged man who is telling someone named Jeff that they need to get ahead of the situation while there's still time. The next 11 pages are a flashback sequence that starts with some news coverage of the president and first lady departing for Asia. Also, we see the decidedly blonde first daughter standing with the deputy chief of staff, Whitkin, and the commentators reference Marilyn's sometimes embarrassing behavior, such as when she flipped off the crowd that I mentioned before at one of her father's re-election campaign gatherings. Next, Whitkin is telling Marilyn not to F this up for him. She tries to convince him to let her throw a party, but Witkin isn't having any of it. Marilyn paces, trying to come up with a plan, when she accidentally twists the bust of James Madison near her, which opens a secret door with stairs heading down into darkness. Later, Abe tells her it's an escape tunnel built after the War of 1812. Abe's offhand comment about the White House being the mystical beating heart of the U.S. gives Marilyn the idea of the big-ass party that she mentions. That beautiful psychic bonfire. So even though I criticized it a little bit, criticized her being a little naive, the idea of first of all, Abe being possessed by the ghost of Abraham Lincoln and this mystical beating heart, the White House being the mystical beating heart. So now we're stepping into a little bit of fantasy, a little bit of perhaps magical realism, which very subtle, but I really like that. So, it's entirely possible that having this party could do exactly what Marilyn is thinking. So, if only. The next scene is Marilyn and Abe walking the tunnel. On a wall is written in the background is, "There are more tapes." And I really wish that we had seen a little bit more of that kind of stuff, but maybe we would have seen more things like that in future issues. Marilyn is grossed out by stepping on what she thinks is a human skull, and Abe quips it's probably one of the long-lost Teapot Dome conspirators. And then there's a reference to, Abe makes a reference to the Credit Mobilier, which I actually had to look that one up. So, A+ for the American history references in this comic book. So, I dig history, American history, especially, and I really like that. They go into a room that turns out is that sex room for Marilyn Monroe and JFK's rendezvous. Marilyn mentions that Marilyn Monroe is her hero, and she has a fantasy sequence where she's dressed like Monroe in the movie Gentlemen Prefer Blondes, I believe, as she performed Diamonds Are a Girl's Best Friend. Also, as we'll get into it, to me, it evoked Madonna. So, and there's more to that here. She says she sees two things when she looks at Marilyn Monroe. First, Madonna, someone who figured out what the world wanted from her and got them to throw themselves at her feet for it. Someone who made herself immortal. This is our Marilyn talking about Madonna. This is interesting to me because this would have set this story near the mid-'80s, at least, despite the opening caption on page 1 that declares the present day as the early '80s. And I only say that because I just don't recall Madonna being spoken about like that, like Marilyn does, until later. Like I'm thinking the late '80s, maybe even the early '90s. But then again, I've always been a bit behind the pop culture curve, so especially when it comes to music. When Marilyn refers to the second thing she sees, she pauses because Abe is now in the fantasy with Abe being dressed in a tux, her hand open to Marilyn. They dance briefly before Marilyn sees singer Sykes and goes to him saying, "I see myself," as Abe looks on. The fantasy ends with Abe in front of the other male suitors who are left behind. It's kind of sad, actually, that little scene. On the next page, we are back at the party with Marilyn flirting with Sykes and Abe recording it. Marilyn tells Abe to go record the party, not her, because important people are there, like Adamant and Billy Idol. And Abe walks away despondent. Elsewhere, Whitkins happens upon the DJ Dr. Mode, whom we saw at the very beginning of the story, who tells the deputy that he came from the tunnel and points back at that opening. And we get that same great word sound effects emanating from the open doorway. And it looks like the bust of James Madison. It's facing us, and I swear the way it's drawn, the inking on here, that he's winking at us. So I thought that was a nice touch. Anyway, so this is where I'm a little confused about the location of the final scene, because it appears to be somewhere in the tunnels below the White House, yet Dr. Mode is there, but he walked out of the tunnel. So maybe that's just, they just got lost in terms of who was where. Anyway, it drew me out of the story a little bit. Regardless, as Marilyn is declaring the assembled partiers that it's time to set this place on fire, we see a woman in the next panel sitting at a desk with a cigarette in her hand. There's another panel of Marilyn standing on a dais, followed by another picture of this woman. But it's a close-up of her face where you only see her red lips and blonde hair. Then Marilyn leaps into the crowd saying, "Let's burn," and the final image on the page is of Marilyn Monroe winking at us with the caption box telling us, "Next, rapture." I love this sequence of panels teasing Monroe before the final page. It also mirrors Marilyn's wink at us on page 1. So, in fact, with my mention of the Madison bust, looking like he's winking at us, I now need to go back through this issue and see if anybody else is winking at us throughout the whole issue. But anyway, as I already said, I really enjoyed this issue and had been, as I said, I had pre-ordered the others before the plug was pulled. And in part why I enjoyed this so much, I was immediately drawn in by Marilyn's personality and her newfound, I guess, punk sensibilities, or maybe not newfound because earlier she's flipping off the cameras. And the overall, like I said, the magical qualities, the ghosts, well, the ghost of Abe Lincoln, the ghost of Marilyn Monroe, I guess. And what was suggested we'd be seeing later. So I also want to know more about Abe, her possession, her feelings towards her best friend, which is kind of obvious here. But where would that progress? How would that work out between the two of them? Would this party have had an effect on the country in the way that Marilyn wanted? What would she say to her namesake if they met? How would Witkins fare by the end? Like, I really care about this asshole. But anyway, alas, all those questions were never answered. But I can tell you what was teased for the subsequent issues, what might have been. So Marilyn Manor number 2. What do you do when the lead singer of a world-famous punk rock band keels over from an overdose in the middle of a White House rager? Simple. Call on the ghost of Abraham Lincoln. Also, Marilyn gets eaten by the fame monster. I mean, come on. That just screams awesome to me. I'm so upset that I didn't get this. Issue number 3. Live Forever. It's a long, strange trip through the American myth as Marilyn and Abe try to bring back the dead. If you are at all confused by that description, please bear in mind that you are correct to be so. I don't know. I don't really like it when they provide commentary like that for solicitations. I don't. What's the point of it besides being cute? Issue number 4. In a manner of speaking, she was to be the manor board, which is, a manor, whatever, is a play on the phrase to the manor born. So I thought that was a nice play on words. So first brat Marilyn Keller decided to throw an innocent little gathering of 1,000 close friends and celebrities and trash the White House while President Dad was away in a trade mission. Throw in some cracked vinyl, a Ouija board, and a few dead presidents. See? A few dead presidents. Come on. Would we have seen JFK? Who else would we have seen? And the ultimate rager folds in on itself. The question remains, will Marilyn save the day or just save herself? With a little help from her own personal Jesus in the final issue of the weirdest post-punk White House party of the 20th century. So, Personal Jesus was the name of a song by a band I don't recall at the moment, but what does that mean? What was the intention for that? Who's her personal Jesus? Anyway, if I had reviewed this issue when it first came out in the summer of 2019, I would have recommended it if you love weird mystical journeys set in the early 80s, or if, like me, you like Marley Zarconi's illustrations. So I particularly enjoy her work. I think she did work on Shade the Changing Girl, and that was another weird mystical type odd comic book that thematically I can see some connections between those two. And was that also written by Visaggio? I don't remember. Anyway, I was so looking forward to the rest of the series. As I said, I'm surprised it hasn't been published elsewhere in the meantime. But maybe there are some rights issues. Maybe IDW still holds them. I don't know. That prevents that. That would be unfortunate. If so, shame on them for denying us the rest of the story. So, what do you think about Marilyn Manor #1? And what could have been? Do you want to see how the story ends, like me? If so, let me know. Email me at longboxreview@gmail.com. You can leave comments also at the website longboxreview.com. And with that will close out this episode, this particular one-hit wonder examination. And there are others I'll be doing in the future. So, or if you have any suggestions for such single-issue stories, like specials like this, let me know. I'd appreciate it. And with that, I will leave you. And thanks for listening. I'll talk to you later. Bye-bye.